Literary Carnival 2013. And this session is about the past is always present. History is never history. So I request all of you to kindly settle down as we are about to start in the next couple of minutes. And once again, let me retell you that make sure that you keep your cell phones on silent. Thank you very much. All right, so for this session we have a very eminent panel that will be on stage, and after which they'll be answering to all your queries. Starting up with Mr. Gyan Prakash, he is the Dayton Stockton Professor at the History at Princeton University and is the author of several books. His publications include the widely acclaimed Mumbai Fables, which forms the basis of the script he wrote for Bombay Velvet, a film currently under production under the direction of Anurag Kashyap. In 2001, at the British Library, London, he discovered a manuscript for a novel written in 1927 by a Bombay Parsi, Firozshah Jamshedji Chaiwala, The Tar of Silence. He edited and with an introduction by him was published in the year 2013. So welcome, sir. Now, next we have Zareen Masani. He has an Oxford History doctorate and is the author of several historic books on India, including a widely acclaimed biography on Indira Gandhi, Indian Tales of the Raj, and India from Raj to Rajiv. He spent 2 decades as the current affairs producer for the BBC and is now a freelance journalist and historian. His most recent book, Pioneers of India Modernization, explores the controversial legacies of British India's most influential policymaker. Mr. Zarir is a son of late Indian politician Meenu Masani and the grandson of eminent historian Sir Rustam Masani. His recent family memoir, and all is said, is a riveting saga of romance, politics, and society from the Raj era to the days of the emergence and its aftermath. We also have Bapse Sidhwa, who grew up in Lahore and now lives in Houston, Texas. Her novels, An American Brat, Cracking India, The Pakistani Bride, The Crow Eaters, and Water have been published in several European and Asian languages. Her first collection of short stories, Their Language of Love, was published earlier this year. Among her many honors, Sidhwa received the Bunting Fellowship at Radcliffe Harvard, the Zoroastrian Literature Award, the Pakistani Honor Sitara-e-Imtiaz, and the Wallace Reader's Digest Writers Award, and most recently, the Italian Premio Mondello in 2007. And we also have a very eminent personality, Mr. Aman Sethi, who is the Africa correspondent for The Hindu and the author of A Free Man. He is the winner of the Press Institute of India and International Committee of the Red Cross Award for Conflict Journalism, and the Economics Crossword First Book Award at the Satya Akademi Yuva Puraskar for A Free Man. So we have the eminent panelists on stage, and I do not actually ask you to welcome them because you have to. Now, I really apologize for reading because with such eminent personalities on stage, it's very difficult to actually keep talking about them because they've got a lot to talk about, but I'll leave the entire conference in their hands. Thank you very much for joining us, sir and ma'am, and I hope you have a great session today. Thank you.
Hello. So after that long introduction, and given that this is a really interesting subject, I'm just going to take my wallet out of my pocket, and then, yeah. So let's just, we're just going to get straight to it, yeah? So the way we're going to broadly have this conversation is that we're going to introduce an idea of themes. We're going to try and get our eminent panel to kind of think about these ideas, and then obviously we'll throw it open to your questions. So I'm just going to, like I said, dive straight into it. As you know, today we've had 4 states actually going to the results of 4 states coming out in the elections today. And so I was sort of interested in these ideas of, since this is a panel on history and the present, I was interested in the idea of popular politics. And I was interested in trying to map a sort of psychic current that underpins popular politics. When we are, say, confronted by, the rise of the left in the 70s, or, for instance, the rise of the BJP in the mid-90s, Mandal politics, these things are sort of introduced to us as things that were inevitable, that it was inevitable that this particular politics would be produced at this particular time. But at the same time, when we read the works of historians such as yourself, such as Gyan, or we read Bapsi's novels, we get a sense that every moment is imminent. There are many different politics that could have arisen out of any particular event, be it the partition, be it the collapse of the mills, or be it even the history of things like Lord Macaulay and the idea of where would this kind of English language politics go, and how did the Dalit movement decide that they wanted to be part of it. So perhaps I thought we could start by asking you all to think about this idea of where do you believe a kind of popular politics is built from? What are the factors that really drive it in any given moment, based on your work and in the context of your work? Why don't we start with you and go this way, and then?
Well, I mean, just picking up on what you said about certain historical moments are presented as given, that it had to happen. And it's true that, the way in which the past actually, the present posits a certain past. And the idea is that you would inevitably, lead towards it. I mean, just to take another sort of a general example, in today's era of, let's say, free market orthodoxy, our entire history from, let's say, 1947 onwards is presented as a history of missed opportunities, license Raj, and so on. And the idea was that that had to become history, that had to be discarded in order for the present to come into being. And in doing so, of course, we overlook many other possibilities and histories that were present. And that included various kinds of, let's say, popular politics, which, of course, we never foresaw, or from the point of the view of the present, we never foresaw. And they appear as if, first, to the extent that they appear as either unnecessary or momentary or something to be overcome.
Give us an example of this.
So, for example, the emergence of Dalit politics, for example. Now, the emergence of Dalit politics is inseparable from, let's say, the memory that Dalits have of stigma. And they use the memory of stigma in order to build a positive politics of rights. Okay? Now, let's say the left politics, for example, saw Dalits only as agricultural workers and thought that they could build a politics based on that ideology of agricultural workers. And they thought that the memory, the stigma of being Dalit wasn't important. So the politics of dignity wasn't important for them. And then, so they built their notion of history with the expectation that class politics would rise up and transform the present. And what they confronted with is a politics which is based on a sort of a memory of injury, a memory of stigma and humiliation, and they don't know what to do with it.
Right. Let's move on and let's get Zarir in on this.
I don't know if this microphone is on. Is it?
It is.
Yeah. I'm having a problem with the sound from the rest of you because there's an echo, and as of...
They can't hear.
You can't hear.
Hold it closer.
Okay.
It's on, but just hold it closer.
Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah. I'm getting an echo from the others, and I'm finding it difficult to follow what either of you are saying.
Right.
I don't know if your sound engineers can do something about it. As a former radio producer myself, I think your sound is distorting.
Do you want to pause for that?
Are people hearing me all right? Okay, well then let's just carry on. My take on this is basically that obviously it's a truism to say that the past is always present, because clearly where we are today is where we are today. Can you? Okay, where we are today is clearly the outcome of where we were, 100 years ago, 50 years ago. We live with the legacies of the past. My own work as a historian has been triggered by experiences of the present, which have taken me to the past. My last book was a biography of Lord Macaulay, and what triggered it was discovering that Dalit activists were celebrating Macaulay's birthday as English Day. They were worshipping the goddess of English and building their own temples to her. And this was happening 150 years after Macaulay, who was only here for 4 years. So, I mean, it's quite amazing. And Macaulay had become such a symbol of vilification by nationalist and left-wing historians who, labeled everyone Macaulay's children. But here were Macaulay's children who came from the Dalit caste, who were very proud to be Macaulay's children. But where I would disagree with the proposition is that I don't think the inquiry into the past needs to be a critique of the present or have anything very directly to do with the present. I'm fascinated by ancient classical history, ancient Greece, Rome, ancient India. British television is full of dramas and documentary series about ancient Greece and Rome. It's very striking that there's practically nothing on Indian television about classical Indian culture, and I think that is important in its own right. It doesn't have to reflect directly on the present.
Let me push you. Can you hear me? Is it clear?
I can hear you now.
Okay. So let me push you further on this. When you said that there is a section that vilifies Macaulay, and then there is a Dalit movement that embraces him. Where do you think that fault line lies? Why is it that certain groups find it profitable to vilify Macaulay, and why is it that certain groups find it profitable to embrace him? What, in the course of your research, explain the motivations of these two divergent kind of moments?
Well, it's again a truism to say that history is written by the winners or the victors. So clearly, when the Indian nationalist movement was successful, they were the victors, and they wrote India's history, in a form that was very anti-colonial and actually took people like Macaulay out of context and, kind of demonized them. Those histories get revised as time goes on, and people realize that, there are very positive legacies, such as the rule of law, the Indian Penal Code, the English language, of course, which were directly the work of Macaulay. So, I think the pendulum of history swings, and I think that's quite healthy, that historians do have to revise their thinking. They do have to argue with each other and disagree.
Right. So I'm going to ask Bapsi to comment on this, and I'd like you to maybe use the partition as a starting point to A, just talk about your work and the theme that your work explores in terms of the resonance of partition, and B, to perhaps give us a sense of how you think the partition has influenced politics in, well, I would love to know in India and in Pakistan, but just feel free to answer whichever parts of my question you want to.
Well, is this on? Can you hear me?
A little louder, Mike. Do you want to try my mic?
Just have to hold it very close.
Okay now? Okay. Well, I write fiction, and a lot of it is historical fiction. Cracking India or Ice Candy Man, for example, is about the partition that took place, which we spell with a capital P. And I was about 8 years old at the time of partition. And I grew up hearing my aunt and my mother and all talking. I was in Lahore. And, this is where the main rioting took place, because suddenly nobody knew where Lahore was going, where Amritsar was going, where Gurdaspur was going. And, suddenly the land was divided. And the Sardarjis, basically the Sikh community, felt the most threatened. They felt, well, we don't know where we will be. And the Sikhs were mainly settled in the Punjab. And so this horrendous cycle of violence started, where villages were attacked, and the Muslim villages were attacked and moved to go into Pakistan, and the Hindu and Sikh villagers were attacked to go and move into what was India. And most of the people didn't know what is Pakistan, why are the British going, what is happening, because the main lot of people were villagers. They were not very educated. It was the politicians manipulating history, as they always do. In that respect, history always repeats itself, yeah.
But let's try and drill down a bit on this. So we say, okay, partition happened, yeah, partition happened. And my experience in conversations with people, so I come from a partition family. My family moved from Dera Ismail Khan to Delhi. And my sense was that my grandfather and his generation is the one that's been the most affected by this move. Somehow his politics were far softer and of his generation, were far more, you could say, syncretic than the politics of the generations that followed. So one would assume that the guys who were most affected by the partition, who were 25, 30, 35, 40, like my grandfather was, would be the ones who would be, for example, the most aggressively anti-Pakistan or anti-India. But it turns out they're not the ones who are as kind of psychically affected as their parents, as their children. Is this something you've seen as well?
I'm not quite hearing you. Your voice is echoing too much.
Right. Okay.
Can you tell me what he said?
Why don't
I don't know if can you hear me?
Yeah.
We're all having a problem with the mics. I think Aman's point was that the people who lived through partition are less militant and sort of divided than the generation that has come afterwards.
Aman, this is what has been bothering me so much, this very issue you brought up, that people who suffered during partition, which was mainly in the Punjab, and I feel they have forgiven each other to a large extent. They believe they were the perpetrators as well as the victims, And the people who had nothing to do with partition, people in Gujarat and Bombay and, maybe in the frontier provinces in Pakistan, they are creating much more